Ozzie, good to see you, bud.
Good to be jamming with you,
Yeah,
Jim.
man. Yeah, we got some history together, don't we?
We sure do, man.
You know, I've had the pleasure of doing a couple of projects for GuitarControl.com. I did some rock and the blues and solo of acoustic guitar and eclectic electric, and I'm guessing that a lot of the guitar players out there. I know you, in your work here, you've mentioned guitar players coming in and playing in different keys.
Yeah. It's enjoyable to play with people and jam with them. You and I have done a lot of it.
You know, us guitar players, we like open strings, like E and A and D and all that. And I'm glad you mentioned that in your project. But I think I'd like to hear a few stories now. I know you got a story about a guy called Jimi Hendrix, which you know, I know many of the guitar players, if not all the guitar players that are listening in on this, would be interested in hearing your story about what happened with Jimi Hendrix. How did that happen with you? And I know you were a young guy when it happened.
I was touring in England, and I was working with some English guitar players and keyboard players, and they had the day off, the night off. And we went up to a show, and it was headlined by, second billing was a band called Cream with Eric Clapton, but the headliner was a guy named Jimi Hendrix, who I'd never heard of. I'm from the US. Jimi Hendrix made his name over in England. Well, he had the Jimi Hendrix Experience, and they were going full tilt, and they were just about to bust in here to the United States, but I got to see him in a cattle auction barn in the northern part of England, packed to the hilt, and he was the last guy to go on. And it was astounding because he did it all. Turned his Marshalls all up to 11, lit his guitar on fire, blew the audience completely away, including me, because I had never heard a guitar player like that in my life.
I bet Clapton was a little nervous too.
Yeah, I think so. I'd never seen Clapton put his guitar up and bite it with the strings, because he knew he was up against you know, a real showman. I met him after the show. I met Jimi Hendrix after that show, and we had a chance to talk, because he's from the U.S., and everybody in England assumes if you're from the U.S., you know each other.
Right.
You know? Right. And we talked, and it's interesting because flash forward about a year, and here I am in New York City with my band, and we're working at Electric Lady Studios, and the executive producer on the project is none other than Jimi Hendrix. Wow. And we had something to share, and that was the time that we met in England. And I have something to share with you as a guitar player, because when I asked Jimmy, just in casual conversation, you know, what color do you like, you know, where'd you go to school, I came up with, well, I mean, really, who is your influence? I mean, who do you really listen to? Who do you think is possibly the greatest guitar player? And he looked at me and he said, Curtis Mayfield. Now, a lot of people don't know about him because he was the lead guitar player, singer from a band called, or a group called The Impressions, you know. People get ready, there's a train a-coming. It's picking up passengers from coast to coast. So that's a band that most people wouldn't think of as Jimi Hendrix idol. But he had a way of, you know, the things that Jimi Hendrix played, he learned
all that.
Curtis Mayfield. People should have known, you listen to one person, the influences come through. And it's a great way to connect with somebody is when you listen to that music, you listen to what other people are doing. Now, no one would have thought that was it. He thought he was playing like Curtis Mayfield. Yeah, Jimmy James.
You know, he toured with those in the Chitlin circuit and all that, which is, I guess, partly how he got his great R&B chops that he developed and kind of psychedelicized and blew all our minds with. Yeah, but that was his inspiration. It's
interesting because I picked up a gig as a kid. I played with a group called the Shirelles when they were sort of becoming, you know, golden oldies.
Motown.
And I heard about a guitar player that was in that band playing under Joe Henderson, who was a great guitar player, who was their band leader. Little did I know that the left-hand guitar player named Maurice was Jimi Hendrix. He changed his name to Maurice James for a while. Well, they kept talking about this incredible guitar player, and he'd gone on and he's playing in New York now. Well, again, R&B, that's where he had his roots, was in that kind of music. And if you listen to it, it really is rooted there. He got psychedelic. That's
the Voodoo Child. The Voodoo
he got psychedelicized.
Now, speaking of legends, just going back a little bit further, I know you had an occasion to tour with a guy called Chuck Berry, which we all know Chuck Berry is rock and roll. Little Richard's Chuck Berry, you know, one of the pioneers of rock and roll. And now, what about Chuck's manager? Tell me about Chuck's manager, because I know you told me a story about how we all know stories about Chuck Berry. He likes to get paid before the show.
I don't know if this is going to get out there, But you have to realize, this was a few years ago, Chuck and I were touring, and each time